Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Janai and this is Karmic Fixer Tarot. And I've been wanting to do a reading for a few days now. Um, I've I've had a lot of stuff kind of come up and whatnot, but I'm happy to be here. This is going to be, I think my readings tend to be pretty quick, not too long. I don't think I've put up anything over half an hour. So I like to have just simple, straightforward readings about things that are just kind of on my mind that I hope resonate with you if you're watching. Um, let's see, I have been thinking a lot about joy. I think just a little bit about myself. I've been learning astrology along with learning tarot. Astrology is something that I've been interested in since I was a little girl. I didn't really pursue it because, growing up, I grew up in an evangelical household, and of course, things like astrology, tarot, divination, occult, that sort of thing, obviously doesn't jive with, with a Christian upbringing. So it's always been something that I've been interested in, but I've just kind of, casually dug into it, learning about the different signs of the zodiac and whatnot. But lately, I've really been getting into natal charts, the significance of the different planets, the significance of the houses in the charts and things like that. So I'm still learning astrology. I'm still learning how to read a natal chart, and that's something that I'm really interested in still practicing, and hopefully that's something that I can really develop skill at. Who knows, that might be something that I add, another element that I add to this channel. But anyway, I have my natal chart, and I have noticed, very interestingly, I'm a Cancer sun, and I have a Libra stellium, including my moon sign and a few other planets. Let me think. There's Pluto, and there's Mars, and there's my Lilith sign in Libra. And Libra rules my fifth house, the house, I believe, of pleasure, of enjoyment. I think overall pleasure, but there's also different elements, children, sexuality, that sort of thing. Again, still learning. Please correct me in the comments if I'm off. But I think overall, fifth house represents pleasure, and since that's where my Libra stellium is, that leads me to believe that that's something I should lean into, finding ways to add more joy, pleasure, levity to my life. And suffice to say, it's not necessarily something that I've always done. I tend to be pretty cerebral, pretty introverted, and I think that's been kind of a product of nurture more than nature, even though with some of my other placements, I am pretty reserved. I'm fairly private, that sort of thing. I don't necessarily unlock my whole personality right away. I kind of gatekeep my personality a little bit. And that's kind of been what I've wanted to explore on this channel. This channel is kind of a outlet for me to grow in tarot and astrology and divination, all the things that I've had an interest in for a long time, but I really haven't explored. And those are things that I find enjoyable. That's a real gateway toward fun and pleasure and enjoyment, I'm finding. So in light of, I guess, my stellium, that strikes me as something that I do need to work on. Just kind of remember that life is a journey. There are serious things. There are things where, you need to buckle down and do what it is you have to do. But you have to find ways to have joy, ways to enjoy life, I guess, simply put. And I know this kind of, maybe it follows on a little bit with my last reading. If you haven't seen it, don't bother. It's a little, I wasn't in the right frame of mind, and I was attempting cartomancy with Uno cards. That's something else that I'm exploring. I think that's really cool. A really fun way to, do cartomancy, to do divination using, common familiar games like Uno, or just using playing cards and whatnot. But I think this particular reading, it kind of follows up on trying to add more joy, more fun to life. But I've really been thinking of joy in terms of resistance. Now I know this is tarot, and I really try not to be super political, even though there's nothing wrong with being political. there might be some political leanings, some social commentary. Actually, there'll probably be a lot of social commentary as I continue to grow this channel. But it doesn't necessarily have to be, about our political system here in the US. It doesn't have to be party politics, that sort of thing, even though it might be from time to time, but that's not the main thing. But I was thinking of joy in terms of resistance. In times of uncertainty, in times where freedom seems to be on the line, democracies are failing, the US for starters, just kind of when things seem to be taking a turn towards authoritarianism. I know it seems kind of heavy. Finding ways to still carve out joy in your life, and not just, joy, happiness, finding ways to bring levity, an escape from, at least a momentary sort of escape from life. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an escape. Joy doesn't necessarily have to be escapist, but I think joy can be resistance. It can be defiant in a way, when it really feels like our governments and, the people who have control over our daily lives through politics, through legislation, through culture, through, capital. And when it really seems like those institutions are actively trying to still our joy, actively trying to clamp down on resistance, on truth telling, on freedom, finding ways to still express yourself joyfully, finding ways to defiantly, defiantly be human, defiantly express yourself, and to live in the fullness of expression, the fullness of life. I think that's really important in these times. So I think that's what this reading is going to be. My readings tend to be, 3 cards. I've found a spread that I really like, kind of an advice from the universe spread. 3 cards, one of which tells me something that maybe I need to know, or maybe even it's something that I already know. And the second card is usually a new perspective on something I'm thinking about. And the third card might be an action step, something that I can actually do to reach a goal, or something I can actually carry out to, to take the advice from the universe. So my query to the universe, to spirit, to our spirit guides, whatever it is you want to call it. I can't always decide what to call it. I usually go with spirit, but I don't know if it matters as much. But I am curious. Spirit, tell me your thoughts on joy as a way to resist authoritarianism, as a way to resist injustice, as a way to resist hardship, as a way of defiance, as a way of activism. So, Spirit, what would you like me to know about joy as a positive, powerful force in our daily lives? Okay, I'm just doing a shuffle, and I'm using my hoodoo deck, a deck that I've really come to enjoy. See, I'm not wearing contacts, and I don't have my glasses on. I don't necessarily love wearing glasses on these because, the ring light and the glare and all of that. I'm sure there's a practical fix to that. Maybe it's just get different glasses. But in the meantime, yeah, I'm just kind of doing a little shuffle, not wearing my glasses. I hope I'll still be able to read the cards. But yeah, Spirit, what can you tell me about joy as a form of resistance? Joy in spite of hardship. That might seem like a broad question, but any advice you can give me, Spirit, I am always grateful for it. So I'm cutting the cards now. Okay, so we have our cards. I'm pulling now. Okay. So the first card is my what I should know. Maybe it's what I already know deep down, or something that Spirit wants to remind me of. And we have Four of Sticks. And the Four of Sticks, in this deck, the sticks represent the wands. So, Four of Sticks. Just want to think about this is the Four of Sticks is a card of celebration, of coming together. And this might seem really obvious, but we're looking here at a couple. They are, yes, I could say this is a couple. They are together. They are either laying down flowers or are just kind of gathered together with themselves and enjoying each other's company. Let's see. I think there's community and there's also coming together on an individual level, you know, just kind of building relationships, building from the seed of relationship and just kind of allowing that to go. This looks like this is a moment it's not like, I think if you think of different decks, particularly the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, maybe the four looks a little more celebratory or like on a bigger level. But this seems like a very individual card. This is celebration, but it seems a little more low key. It seems a little more intimate, I think. So I think this represents, you know, building from individual relationships, you know, starting small and things building out. This might be a reminder to not neglect the intimate relationships in your life. If you are interested in, if you're thinking in terms of joy, think of the simple things that bring you joy. It doesn't necessarily have to be a big, bombastic scene. Just think of the simple things, you know, maybe being out in nature with a loved one. They've got flowers that they're laying down. This doesn't look like a gravesite or whatnot, but they're just kind of, it's the two of them. They're connecting with nature. They are taking a really sort of intimate, very sort of earthy approach to joy. I think they're getting in touch with nature. They're showing love and gratitude for each other's company, it looks like. And I think this shows a good place to start. Don't neglect personal relationships, intimate relationships. It's a lot of times you'll find joy in just looking around you at what it is that you already have. So that's a beautiful card for what I know or what I need to know, maybe what I already know deep down, or just what Spirit would like to remind me of. Now, this next card is New Perspective, and this is Ten of Sticks, also known as Ten of Wands. And this card in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck and in other decks tends to represent hard work, in some cases, overwork. And I think in this particular case, we have a woman who's going about meaningful work. And I think a new perspective on joy. Maybe from the way that I'm thinking about it, maybe I'm overthinking it. I tend to be somebody who can be stuck in overthinking a little bit. But let's see, this lady is about her business. You know, she's just going about the business of joy. Maybe following on to this card here. They're in the same suit, and we're starting off with, you know, two people in an intimate relationship, just kind of, at least I would assume it's intimate. It looks pretty intimate to me. You know, they're taking joy in the simple things in life, in the, you know, the smaller moments. And this card, I think, represents going about meaningful work, things that you have to do. They can sometimes, you know, things that are compulsory can sometimes feel like drudge work. They can sometimes, is that a word, drudge work? They can feel like the drudgery or whatnot. They can feel, you know, exhausting. They can feel, you know, compulsory things don't always bring us joy. You know, if you have to get out of bed sooner than you want to, or work later than you intended to, or do something that you don't necessarily love to do in order to do that thing that you do love to do. Um, I think this is another call to find joy in your work. Maybe that seems a little simplistic, but I think keep in mind the reasons behind what it is you're doing, the motivation for what it is you're doing, and you can find the beauty in the things that you have to do in order to get to the things that you want to do. At least that's what this card looks like to me. She's got the sticks on her back, and she's also apparently walking with one, and she's still managing to go about her work. And, you know, she stooped over. It looks like hard work, but she's doing what needs to be done. She's reaching for this beautiful fruit here, and I think this fruit will definitely be pleasurable. Um, I believe that's fruit or flowers. It looks more like fruit to me. So the labor that you do will bring you to what it is you love to do. It'll bring you to the sweet things. All right. And our third card, them bones. Hmm. Now, in this particular deck, them bones represents judgment. Well, that's interesting. Hmm. Judgment. Hmm. This might be something to think about. When we think about the judgment card, that card comes before the world card. The world card, is the last major arcana card. If we think about the journey from the Fool, the first major arcana card, down to the world, which is the last major arcana card, it symbolizes the end of a journey. It symbolizes maybe coming full circle, reaching a sort of, let's see, the word nirvana comes to mind, but it's reaching a sort of culmination of your goals, reaching a culmination of enlightenment, of understanding, of knowing, coming into your fullest self. But before you can get to the world, you get to judgment, or in this case, dim bones. So maybe when you're thinking about leaning into joy as resistance, I think it is important to think about where it is you've come from, where it is you're going, and who it is you need to be in order to get to where it is you want to be. Maybe that sounds a little vague, but it's a card of reckoning. It's a card of taking stock of who you are, taking stock of your accomplishments, maybe your setbacks, lessons that you've learned. It's an invitation to learn the lessons that you need to learn before you can reach the fullness of the world, the end of the major arcana cycle. So I also think this is accountability. In order to have joy, in order to have just kind of the fullness of life, you have to take stock of where it is you are. Make the changes that you need. It's almost like when you think of judgment, I I think of things like reckoning with. I'm thinking about kind of myself here, maybe reckoning with, for example, finances. For example, maybe think about the things that think about the things that need to be taken care of. Are you on the right track? Have you made all of the preparations? Have you reckoned with all of the things? Have you settled up all your bills? Have you taken accountability for the things that you've done, the things you need to do? And this is an invitation to do that if you want the life that you want, if you want to if you want your dreams to come true. Take accountability, do the hard work in order to have the fruit. And I guess you could think about this in terms of this. You're doing the hard work. She's reaching out for the fruit, for the vegetation, for the flowers. She can't get to that though without the necessary work that she needs to do. And this card of judgment, dim bones, she is, her eyes are open to what bones are being thrown, maybe the things she didn't know about in her life, maybe, spirits kind of reading her mail, um, eating her lunch and popping the bag or whatever. So you have to have your eyes open. You have to be willing to reckon with maybe things that you don't want to reckon with, maybe things that are challenging. I mean, you have to do that hard work anyway. And just kind of thinking about this card, this is really interesting. When you think about resistance, when you think about joy in the face of adversity, that joy is for you. And I think sometimes when people see other people having joy, I think about our state of affairs here in the US. And the thing that really comes to mind, one one example that I think a lot of people have been thinking about lately is, I think it's been 2 Sundays ago, at this point, the Super Bowl halftime show. Bad Bunny. I'm, you know, I enjoy reggaeton. I can't say that I'm a massive fan, but even I know who Bad Bunny is. And, it was a beautiful show. It was a show that it, it was a performance that paid homage to the people of Puerto Rico, the strength, the beauty, the culture, the joy in the face of adversity. There were so many moments in that show. Lots of people have done really brilliant deep dives on the cultural symbols, the significance of each of the elements of the show. Everything came together beautifully. Um, and it was a celebration, it was representation that Puerto Rico really needed. It brought awareness of America, of the US's history with the island of Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, of course, is a U.S. territory. Puerto Ricans are American citizens. Of course, a lot of people don't know this, which is why representation is very important, which is why that show, um, the Super Bowl is one of the last vestiges of American monoculture. And to have a show like this in the middle of one of the last things that bring all Americans together, even people like me who don't care about football. Even I was watching, I was waiting to get to the halftime show, and plus I was watching for the commercials. But anyway, American monoculture in that moment gathers together for the Super Bowl, and in the middle of this cultural event is Bad Bunny's performance. It's awareness being made of Puerto Rico, of the plight of Puerto Ricans, and everything that they're dealing with in America's, in the US's history with Puerto Rico. All of that brought to light. It made people curious. It made Americans, here in the US, a little more curious about our history with Puerto Rico. Is an opportunity for us to learn more about the history. And it should have been an opportunity. And it was an opportunity for those of us who were curious. And a lot of us who were dialed into the joy that this particular performance brought to a lot of people. One thing that I found myself doing for almost a week or so after the performance, I'm on TikTok watching reactions to Bad Bunny's performance. Puerto Rican Americans, watching, watch parties, and just kind of the joy, the just sort of the outpouring of emotion that people had while watching the show. And it was beautiful to see, and it was very important to see. And when I think about that, I think about the backlash, unfortunately, that, sort of people taking joy in representation of another facet of American culture is something that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, particularly those in the, I dare say, here in the United States, majority culture. Um, I'll just say it, conservative, Republican, white sort of backlash. People not appreciating that there is going to be an all Spanish, you know, halftime show, a show performed by an artist that maybe most people in the U.S. are unfamiliar with. They don't know. They don't know how famous this person is. You know how pivotal this person's performance at this show is. So there's a backlash. There's of course, Turning Point USA. Their halftime show. Kid Rock and the guy who wants to you know drive his truck. That whole thing. Um, and just kind of the vitriol that this performance was met with. There was, when Bad Bunny was announced as the performer, we've had months of backlash, just, this ire directed at this event, at this particular performance. And I think judgment, or dim bones, it can represent people recoiling at the face of other people's joy. And I think there's a lot of that. And you don't want to be somebody who recoils at somebody else's joy. Are you somebody who can, who a mirror of your life or a mirror of your society, of the country you live in, the politics, that sort of thing? If that can be shown to you and you can either take ownership of it, be committed to making positive change, standing up for something good and moving ahead, or are you the sort of person who sees change on the horizon and you're frightened? You don't want to move ahead to the future. You don't want to move ahead toward the world with people who can get past judgment. If you can get past the judgment, the dim bone stage here, you can get to the world. You can get to the end of the cycle. You can get to the fullness of all the good things that can be. And so I think that's what this card represents. I think this card represents being willing to be introspective, being willing to do the hard inner work in order to get to a joyous place. Joy isn't necessarily just about being happy, isn't necessarily just about having fun all the time. When you think about joy, it's actually very biblical. Right on the tip of my brain, I had biblical reference to joy at hand. There's a lot the scripture has to say about joy, for example. There's joy comes in the morning, weeping may endure for the night, but joy comes in the morning. You endure the weeping, and then you reach the joy. There's there's just kind of, joy isn't necessarily like just effusive happiness, but it's a feeling within yourself of, it can be contentment, it can be happiness, it can be an inner sort of knowing, an inner sort of appreciation and gratitude that just sort of emanates from you. It just seems like it's a force, I think. I think it's more of a force than just a feeling. It can be a state of being. And I think you have to be willing to do the work of judgment, the work of reckoning, in order to reach that point. So as our action card, I think this is where dim bones / judgment comes in. Take stock. Be willing to do the inner work. Be willing to do the reckoning with yourself, and maybe abandon ideas that don't serve you as you're moving forward. Be willing to admit maybe when you're wrong. Be willing to acknowledge what you're right about, acknowledge growth, acknowledge places where you need to grow. So I think this is a really interesting sort of action step. Be willing to judge yourself, be willing to reckon with yourself and make the preparations and make the changes that you need to make in order to reach your ultimate happy place, or your ultimate place of joy, contentment. So those are 3 of the pulled cards here. And what I like to do is I like to do a bottom of the deck card just to get maybe another idea of what the reading is. Maybe some additional insight, maybe some insight into the energy of the reading, or maybe just an overall sort of sense of an archetype or an idea that can tie everything together. So here we go with our bottom of the deck card. Okay, I've been pausing a lot because there's a lot of activity going on around me, and I'm really hoping that my reading doesn't get interrupted. But here we go, bottom of the deck card. Two baskets. Collaboration, community, and I think it's very similar to the Four of Sticks. It starts with the people that we love. It starts with just the willingness to, you know, willingness to make connections at a heart-centered level. You know, the baskets in this deck, the baskets represent the cups. So two baskets, two of cups. So it's a meeting of it's a meeting of the hearts and the minds, um, mutual love, respect, and just building from that seed, building from just coming together with others. I don't think joy necessarily exists in a vacuum. You can have moments of solitude that can be joyful and grateful, but joy is to be shared. I think it's about finding your community. It's about building your community. It's about cherishing your family, whether it's the family you were born into or the family that you find and that you choose for yourself. And I think it's making heart centered connections. It's being willing to do the work that it takes to make those connections. I think it's being willing to be vulnerable, being willing to be open, being willing to be generous. And it can just start with two, and it can build. And so that is my general reading on joy. I think I mentioned joy as resistance, which, joy can be resistance, but it can also just be, joy. It can just be a personal sort of feeling of contentment, feeling of wonder, feeling of gratitude. I think all of those things go together to create a life filled with joy, with meaning, with open heartedness. And this is something, of course, that I'm working on. I'm, still very reserved sort of person, but I'm really wanting to find more pleasure in life. Being open to it, knowing that it's not vanity to seek joy. It's not frivolous to seek joy. It sustains us when times can be challenging and when times are good. So yeah, that's just kind of reading that I wanted to do today. I hope this reading resonated with you. If it did, please consider giving it a like and a like and a subscribe if this is your sort of thing. If you're interested in tarot and just kind of, the cards in general. And I hope you enjoyed this reading. And until I see you again, anything you have to say, I guess, about maybe the new setup or just anything at all. Or if you have a different interpretation of these cards, I would love to see it in the comments. And once again, thank you so much for joining me. And until next time.